Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to #Black in STEM, Thriving in the Sciences for Students of Color. This event has been organized by the College of Natural Sciences, College of Engineering, and the College of Information and Computer Sciences at UMass Amherst. If you are interested in learning more about UMass Amherst, contact Ziamara Delobato, the Associate Director of Diversity and Enrollment. Her email is easily accessible online, and we'll also send out some more information about it after this powerful discussion. Before we get started, I would like to thank our organizing team, Promise Machenga, Steve Fernandez, Linda Ziegenbein, and Christy Mitinki. In addition, I would also like to thank the UMass Amherst Alumni Association. We couldn't have done it without you. We would also like to thank our deans and assistant deans for their support in this project. And I would also like to thank the numerous volunteers that have helped assist with this process and will be helping with various aspects of this event. We could not have done this without you. My name is Erica Lynn Dawson-Head, and I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusive Community Development for the College of Information and Computer Sciences, where we commute for the common good. I am so excited for our panel and discussion today. I would like to say thank you to all of our panel participants and breakout room leaders again, because we could not have done this without you also. Before I would like to begin, I would like to provide you with an outline schedule for this evening. The first 30 to 45 minutes of this event will be a discussion with our featured panelists, providing responses to the questions that we've received previously from the audience. And we also will be taking questions while this is rolling, so make sure you get your questions out too, also, if you have anything that you'd like to put out there. The second half of this, participants will be placed into breakout rooms led by UMass staff, graduate students, and will be situated in great conversations where they can have a closer discussion about being Black in STEM and what that means. So, without further ado, let's get started. I would also like to put out there that if anyone has their, please mute yourself if you do have your sound on, because we don't want to interrupt such a powerful conversation. So without further ado again, let's get started and welcome these four amazing people that have done more than just survive the sciences. They are thriving. I would like for each panelist to introduce themselves and provide us with your name, gender pronouns, and what college you're from. And let's start with Shannon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Roberts. I'm an assistant professor in industrial engineering. My pronouns are she and her. And I already forgot what else I'm supposed to say. Erica, can you remind me?
No worries. It's just your name and your gender pronouns and what college you're from.
Oh, perfect. College of Engineering. I think that's it.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Next, we'll go with Brittany Johnson.
Hello, everyone. I am Brittany Johnson. I am a postdoc in the College of Information and Computer Sciences, and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Gerald?
Hi, everyone. Just a quick moment to thank the organizing team. I think we're off to a great start. So my name's Gerald Downs. My pronouns are he, him. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Biology in the College of Natural Sciences.
Thank you so much. And Wilmore?
Thank you very much. I want to thank the organizers as well for putting this together and for the opportunity to be here. My name is Wilmore Webley. I'm an associate professor in microbiology. pronouns he, him, College of Natural Sciences.
We're glad to have you all on this panel. We have a very distinguished panel, and I can tell you're going to tell that. By the time this conversation's over, you'll know that also. I would love to start off briefly and discuss, let's have a discussion as to what is your path? Can you give a brief overview of your path from where you started to where you are now? And why don't we start with Wilmore? Dr. Webley, please.
Okay, so I'm originally from Jamaica. That's where I was born and did my undergrad degree. I am the son of what we call small farmers, which means that they plant, we plant enough so that we can have food to eat. Both of my parents are functionally illiterate. In Jamaica, you pay for high school, so the thought of going to high school wasn't even on the books. Then my dad sold the only asset we had, a bull named Gilbert, and used the money to send me to high school. From there, I met a distant relative who inspired me to go to college. I went to the only college I could have gone to, Northern Caribbean University, where I could enroll in a work-study program. So I worked in the print tree from 7 p.m. until midnight, and that helped to offset my tuition. On Fridays, I worked on the farm. I went with the intention of majoring in engineering, but was advised to go into the major of medical technology, and that's kind of launched my career in the medical sciences. I got a Fulbright scholarship, one of 4 that was issued that year in Jamaica, and that is what got me to the U.S., the University of Massachusetts, where I did a master's degree in microbiology, then the PhD. And immediately after that was hired into the department as a department faculty. So that's kind of a brief overview of how I ended up here at UMass and in the Department of Microbiology.
Thank you so much. What an interesting and powerful story. Shannon Roberts, Dr. Roberts, can you share your story?
Sure. So I am originally from St. Louis, Missouri, and I grew up being told that engineering was the right path for me because I was good at math and science, specifically math more than science. I really love numbers. I went to undergrad at MIT and I studied mechanical engineering. I thought I was going to go to the moon and be an astronaut, and mechanical engineering was the way that I could do that. Once I got there, I started doing research in a different field, industrial engineering. So when I graduated, I decided to get my master's and PhD in that. When I finished with my PhD, I was, let's say, a little bit tired of school. So I needed a little bit of a break. I went to a national lab, MIT Lincoln Lab. I worked there for 2 years on problems related to national security. And after I took my break, if you will, I decided that I wanted to go back to academia because I missed interacting with students and I wanted to teach. So I joined UMass Amherst in 2016. So I've been here for 4 years.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that story. Gerald Downs, Dr. Downs?
I'm originally from Kingston, Mass. That's where I grew up. My dad actually is a UMass alum. He got his master's degree in engineering from UMass Amherst. I think he did it through correspondence school. So took a while. And anyway, I always have had an interest in science and engineering in my background. I graduated from high school, obviously, and then I went on to college at Johnson C. Smith University, which is a historically Black college in Charlotte, North Carolina. I majored in biology and chemistry there. I was originally pre-med, but then I started to work in laboratories and I just loved working in labs. So I was able to spend a semester away at Duke University, and then I spent a summer away at Vanderbilt University, and that really sealed the deal for me in terms of my interest in research and wanting to become a professor myself. I went to Washington University in St. Louis, and I got my PhD in neuroscience there. And then I performed a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania, UPenn in Philadelphia. and I was there for about 5 years. Went on the job market and came to the University of Massachusetts, joined the biology department in 2005.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you very much for sharing your story. And last but not least, Brittany Johnson. Dr. Johnson, can you please share your story?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Sumter, South Carolina. I'm sure many of you have not heard of it. And I actually originally wanted to be a fashion designer. I was very much into fashion and creative design and things like that. And my dad pretty quickly told me, okay, that's a great plan B/hobby. What's plan A? And so I started thinking about other things that I was into. And at the time, MySpace was a huge deal. And I really enjoyed making my own MySpace pages. I didn't know at the time that was computer science, but eventually was introduced to the fact that I was essentially programming. And so I went into college at the College of Charleston, majoring in computer science. I wound up working in a research lab there for 3 years and learning that I really enjoyed doing research more than I enjoyed the development side so much of computer science. And so my mentor at the time said, you should get a PhD. And me, not knowing what I really wanted to do, said, okay, why not? So I ended up going to North Carolina State University to get my PhD. Following that, I, again, very much enjoyed my time doing research as well as working with students, but I wasn't still sure what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be a developer, but I wasn't sure what else my options were or what I wanted to do at that point. And so I ended up in the postdoc here at UMass. And that actually solidified my choice to go into academia. And so now I will be joining the faculty at George Mason University this fall as a assistant professor. So interesting path, but ended up in the right place.
Congratulations, Brittany, and thank you all for sharing your stories. They were all so different, but yet so inspirational. Let's start with this question. Let's not make it easy. Let's just get in there. The question that we have is, how do we challenge the assertion that STEM cannot be racist because it is inherently objective? And anyone can answer this. Looks like Brittany's shaking her head, and I'm gonna go with Brittany.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, it's tough looking at it from a CS perspective, because although there are claims that may be made about how objective STEM in general may be, which unfortunately I don't think I've heard anyone make that particular claim to me, maybe fortunately. But there are a lot of things that you hear and see in a classroom setting, particularly when you're first learning computer science, that whether they're intending for it to come off as racist or not, that is what it feels like, you know? So for example, the whole idea of a master-slave design of a network, that is an actual terminology in computer science. So I think for me, from a computer science background, it's quite easy to challenge that with the material that they teach you with, right? You know, because it comes off as something that's makes you uncomfortable especially when you're the only Black person in the classroom and you're like, well, do I say that I'm uncomfortable with this right now or do I not? So that's a really good question, but also a challenging one, because I think maybe that even varies a little bit by what STEM discipline that you're in.
Thank you, Brittany.
I'd like to jump in if possible. I think people who make that assertion fail to recognize a couple of things. They first of all fail to realize that most people who are racist don't even know that they are. That's the whole problem with systemic and institutionalized racism. If you're not made to become aware of some of the racist platforms on which we've built the educational system of this country, then you wouldn't even realize that the things that you've taken for granted, like what Brittany just talked about, is actually an oppressive thing. So when you start off as an instructor in any class, assuming that all the students that are in front of you started your class on the same level or had the same opportunities, then that in itself inherently that disadvantages students who did not have the opportunity to go to the well-funded high schools where they were doing PCRs and other experiments before they left high school, to somebody whose high school was so underfunded in a poor neighborhood that they barely could keep the lights on. Moreover, to have a lab that can give that sort of output where you would be prepared to start anywhere you are, anywhere you want it to be. So I think essentially this becomes the problem, that if you don't recognize that the starting point for your students of color is very different from those who are more privileged, then you can't begin to address it. So when people say that you can't be racist because, you know, STEM is objective, you're being objective on a false premise.
I'd like to chime in here as well. So a few days ago, I listened to a podcast about facial recognition algorithms. And I thought that was really interesting. And one of the problems that they were confronted with these facial recognition algorithms is that they were really good at distinguishing between different white male faces. But these algorithms, this facial recognition software wasn't very good at distinguishing between the faces of Black men in particular, people of color. And so I'm using that example because although the algorithm itself may not be racist, some of the end results can be racist. So those algorithms are only as good as the training data. And so to train this algorithm, they used a lot of white faces, and it was underrepresented with Black faces, with people of color. And so that means that that algorithm is less good. And in terms of its real world application, and in particular, police departments were using these algorithms to use surveillance footage to try to identify people that might be crime suspects. And so this whole podcast was about how it was sweeping up Black men in particular inappropriately and taking them in because of this problem with the training data. And so I think you can take that example and extrapolate it to what happens in science a lot, that some of the systems, we could argue about whether the systems have some racism in them, but these are systems that are built by people, and the training data, the actual people that go into it, that's biased from the start. And so I think that goes a long way towards why we have the kind of disparities that we see today.
Wow, thank you so much for that. Shannon, would you like some of this, Dr. Roberts?
Yes, the last thing I want to add is that, people talk about maybe methods or results of the outcomes not being racist, and that's debatable. But I think people often forget that the ideas, like the very premise, the topic that you want to study in general may be racist. If you only want to focus on something that affects a certain class of people, then you're ignoring a whole other swath of people, particularly another race, that just isn't being considered when you come up with an engineering problem or a science problem. That in and of itself is also racist. The very premise, the very idea that you decide to study is focusing on a particular population and ignoring someone else, that's also racist.
Thank you so much. What is the most important thing to keep in mind when striving to thrive in STEM?
I'll start again. I think for me, speaking off my own personal experiences, I think one of the most important things for me when it came to not just surviving, but thriving is, and this can be challenging, but finding people you can surround yourself with, whether that's in your department or outside of your department. Sometimes, unfortunately, you don't have the type of support you need within your department, but finding the type of people and support that will uplift your ideas. Sometimes it can be really challenging, especially when you feel like you're not being heard. So I think one of the ways that you thrive is that you get your ideas out there and you publish and you go to presentations and you network and things like that. But it can be hard when you don't have a strong support system behind you, which if you're going the grad school route, that's where your advisor is supposed to come in but that can be a whole other conversation. Sometimes you don't have that support. So I think it's really important finding that foundation of support that can help you not only realize what your passion is and what you really want to do, but to help put yourself in the positions and in the circles that are going to help you do that, and do it comfortably, or as comfortably as possible. I think that was a really big thing for me, especially going through the PhD.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Would anybody else like to speak on this?
I think a really important part is silencing your own inner doubts and fears. One of the challenges that people of color experience is, this constant drumming in your head that you might not be good enough because you've heard it so many times. You've seen it so many times. And sometimes until you reach the place where you're able to suppress that, where you're able to silence that, then you're not even able to get from behind the walls of your own limits that you've set on yourself. And time again, even when you think you've gotten over it, you realize that imposter syndrome raises its head over and over and over again. And sometimes at the level that you are, it's fine and you don't feel that. But then the moment you have the opportunity to elevate your status or elevate yourself to another level, what you realize is that you keep finding excuses as to why you're not ready for that or why it's not the right time. And that in itself is imposter syndrome. And that has been one of my greatest struggles, I would say, that I myself believe some of what I've heard because I've heard it so many times, not just from people who might be coming from a racial or a racist perspective, but from your own family who have been so bogged down by systemic racism. They don't want you to be disappointed. So they try to protect you and to protect you from getting hurt. And so they tell you repeatedly that, hey, you can't do that. That's not for you. And you hear it often enough, you start believing it in spite of yourself. So I found that to be a challenge.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Webley. I'm going to throw this other question out there. Since we're talking about walls and barriers, how have you worked to get into larger spaces as a Black student in STEM?
One of the things that has really helped me get to where I am today is to have an advocate, not a mentor, not an advisor, not a supervisor, but someone who really knows my strengths and my skill set, who's willing to put their neck out for me and say, you should consider Shannon for this position, or Shannon will be really great for that opportunity. And to have an advocate who may be of the majority is also really beneficial. But just having someone who's willing to stick their neck out for you, to open doors for you that would otherwise be closed, is really, really important.
Thank you so much.
I was literally going to say sponsorship and allyship, I think, are really big for putting yourself out there and getting in these larger spaces. Not just getting in these larger spaces, but as Shannon said, having your voice and ideas heard such that you can promote yourself and promote your ideas and move forward. So yeah, absolutely. I complete that.
All right. So this person writes, thank you so much, Brittany, Dr. Johnson, for that. This person writes, the one thing I've heard constantly throughout my academic career is, I'm sorry, but we don't want to establish a new precedent, ... as a justification for deficiencies in equity. Have you experienced this? And how have you addressed the problem?
Well, I would say that, I haven't heard, those exact words, but often when you're challenging the way things have been done, you can hear something that sounds similar to that. that's just how we haven't done it, or is that something that we should be weighing? So I do think that there are different versions of that. I think it's just when you're in the position to just try to constantly push back against that notion, and call people out, call people in when you hear things like that. You can talk about, well, what are the values of our unit, of our department, of this committee, and are we really working towards those values? And is diversity, is that a value? If so, what are we doing to try to address that problem as well? So I think really trying to strip away and get to the core issue can be helpful to try to address that kind of problem.
Thank you so much, Dr. Downs. Would someone else like to speak to that question? All right. So we won't talk about that question anymore, but let's move on to this other one that's pretty interesting. How would you respond to the assertion that there is one pathway to success in STEM?
I would ask, why just stop at STEM? Is there one pathway to success in any academic pursuit or in any programming that you take on? And again, here is where the system oftentimes fail people of color, because the system was set up not necessarily purposefully to disadvantage people of color, but because people of color were not a part of setting up the system. Our needs were never taken into consideration where the system is concerned. So for example, you might have a new faculty member who come into a college or a university setting where you're held to the same standards as everybody else, but yet you're asked to serve on every diversity committee. You're asked to serve on everything that your college or your institution needs to show that it's diverse. And that's never, your service in those arenas are never taken in consideration where tenure and promotion is concerned. You feel obligated many times to do that service, not just because you want to be liked or you want to have currency with your leadership, but because you see the necessity of having somebody, of having that perspective in the room. And so if you're not careful, you overextend yourself. And when you go back, if you step back a few steps and you realize that where you're coming from culturally, you hardly ever say no to your superiors. You hardly ever say no to people who are your elders, who are your leaders. And you put that cultural piece with this institutional hierarchical piece together. And what you have is disadvantage after disadvantage after disadvantage. Again, not because the people who are in charge currently want it to be so, but because it was created without thinking about this other piece. I read a piece just last week. The American Association of Pediatrics put out an apology, and I'm not sure if you saw that, to two physicians who they refused to admit in the 1930s into the association, repeatedly refused to admit. When you went back to the minutes and read it, one of the things that they brought up is, if we admitted them into this organization, they're going to want to eat with us. And of course, we can't have that. We can't have them sitting and eating with us. And today you might look and think, what? We don't want them to eat with us, so as a result of that, they can't be admitted into this organization. They're qualified, they're competent, they have worked just as hard as anybody else. But this is just a pin view into systemic racism that has layers and layers and layers on it. And until you start peeling back those, and it becomes very uncomfortable. Nobody wants to talk about these issues because it makes the minority person uncomfortable talking about it. It makes the majority person feel uncomfortable. But as I always say, you talk about it until you're no more feeling as uncomfortable. Then you know that you're making progress. Then you know that you're ready to move forward. Otherwise, these systems continue, and people are always going to say, but I'm not racist. And I don't think I treat you as racist. And that is true. But what you fail to acknowledge is that the system was not created for progress and promotion of certain groups and classes of people.
I'm sorry if it took me a minute after that, Dr. Webley, but wow, thank you so much for that. Who else would like to talk to that? Would anybody
I just wanted to add real quick, I feel like pointing to events like this, or really any event that is focused on careers in STEM, you find pretty quickly, I mean, there's 4 of us here, all with completely different paths to our current success, and still room to grow. And I feel like it's crazy that anyone would even have that assertion, but the fact that, just given the fact that just by having conversations with people, I mean, I don't think I've literally never spoken to someone who had a path like mine. There are stereotypical paths, but to say there's only one way to be successful through STEM, I think is outrageous and, you know, kind of loaded with a lot of assumptions that that come from being in a box that some people are unwilling to come out of.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. The next question we have is, can you tell us one triumph or a thing that you are proud of accomplishing as a Black student in STEM?
I'm proud of everything that I've done. I feel as if, you know, Black or not, it's hard to get a PhD. It's hard to be successful in STEM. It's hard to navigate your way and your path through a STEM, you know, grad degree and a STEM career. So for me, A, just making it, I'm proud. B, to say that I'm, you know, been able to publish work and to be able to present it in front of large audiences and feel received in those audiences, I'm proud of. To have gone out of my comfort zone to make connections with networks and other communities outside of my own, I'm proud of. I had to learn very quickly, and this goes back to the imposter syndrome that Dr. Webley talked about earlier. I learned quickly to celebrate the accomplishments that you have, right? Because there's going to be a lot of failures. There's going to be a lot of downs, but I'm proud of all of my accomplishments because they've gotten me to where I am today.
I think I'm most proud of the mentorship that I've been able to provide to minority students, to inspire them, you know, from starting on my own family. Again, from that poor background, once I was sent to high school, I wasn't the oldest child. And the expectation was that I would help my family. And through an education, I'm able today to provide the healthcare that my aging and sick parents need. I was able to provide the educational platform for my younger siblings to go to high school, to pay for high school, to help to pay for their college, and to be able to be at a place where my old high school back home, past principals and current principals called up through this COVID-19 outbreak because of the presentations I've been giving in various platforms, call up and say, you know, lots of alums are calling and they're inspired because of the work that you've been able to do and the contribution that you've been able to make at this point in time. So I think for me, there are lots of points of pride. And to be honest, that would never have happened without some really thoughtful and caring mentors, the vast majority of whom are not people of color, the vast majority of whom are Caucasian individuals who took an interest in me and mentored me and cared about me and pushed me forward, even sometimes when I felt like I couldn't go any further.
Thank you so much for that. Would anybody else like to speak to that question? All right. So I think that this will be one of our last questions. So let's get this out there. And I think that you might want to have a little bit of something for this one, because this is going to need a little bit of talking to go with it. what is the one thing you would tell your undergraduate self, or one thing that you would like to tell the Black students we have in attendance?
So I have an immediate answer. The thing that I would want to hear as an undergrad, or that I would like to tell Black undergrads, is it gets better. It gets so much better. It may seem really difficult what you're going through right now, and you may think it's never going to end, but it really does get better as you get older. I think it gets better in general, like the social situation, the political situation tends to improve over time, but also your resilience improves and who you surround yourself with improves. And you find ways to make your life better, and also just in general, the world is getting better day by day. So it gets better.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts. Dr. Downs?
So I'll angle this more towards not myself, but for undergraduate students that might be out there. I think many of us have grown up feeling like, we're called to science, or that we just have this intense interest. And, I would urge students not to ignore that call, that there is a place for people that look like you in science, and that, this is a time where there's a lot of interest in social justice, of course, racial issues, obviously. And so some students might question themselves, why should I focus on science? Maybe I should be doing something else. This seems almost trivial, but, I would reject that. I'm a really big believer in not ceding the space. Science is a very important endeavor. Part of how we hope to get out of this COVID-19 mess is through science, through the development of vaccines. And that just demonstrates how important this space is. And I definitely would not cede that ground and feel like only white people or people that don't look like me belong in that space, that you have every right to be in that space. So I would answer that calling. I would be unabashed about trying to forge ahead. I'd appreciate that your ability to pursue this amazing career has been, the foundation has been laid by the sacrifices of so many, and it's just a real privilege to be able to be in this space. So I would certainly urge students that have some curiosity, that are interested in careers in science, to keep going, to try to silence those, that imposter syndrome, to try to ignore those doubts, and to really keep going. And then to echo what Shannon just said, it does get better, that it can be a fantastic road.
Dr. Downs, I can't thank you enough for what you just said. It's so powerful. And I think we need to hear these things, everything that's been said so far, more often. If you see my smile, it's real, because I am just in my glory with all of you on this panel. It's just absolutely beautiful. But since we were talking about difficulties, let's go into this one more question. What is the most difficult barrier you've had to overcome in your career journey? How did you face it? Start with Wilmore. Dr. Welpley? Okay, maybe not. Let's start with someone else. No worries. We've all had difficulties, and you have to think about it. Like, what are those most difficult barriers that you've had to overcome in your career and journey, and how did you face it?
Well, I'll chime in a little bit. I think it's really important when you're in an environment to try to identify the elements of that are important to succeed in that environment, and make sure that you're working towards those things that are important for you to succeed in that environment. And I think, getting around and answering your question more directly, one of the challenges I've had, I think, is really common among Black faculty, postdocs, and it's something that Wilmore touched on, and it's the call for service, that you can be asked to do an awful lot of service, and the reward for service isn't exactly sufficient. So that is usually not well aligned with career advancement and success. So, I think that there's this term that's been talked about, ethnic or cultural taxation. And you see that a lot with Black faculty doing so much service, and there are only so many hours a day. We only have so much energy, and that comes at the expense of something else. So I think that's something that I've wrestled with. And, when you're asked to be on committees, or you're asked to do all sorts of different things, the courage to say no and to stay focused on those things that are really important for career advancement and for your success.
Thank you for that. Would anybody else I see Brittany's reaching for the computer. Brittany Johnson, Dr. Johnson, come on through.
That's such a tough one, because I definitely agree with Dr. Downs. I think balancing the service, not only the request for service, but kind of some of your desire to do a lot of these service things because A, it's needed, and B, most others are not going to care enough to do it or even do it right. I definitely think that that's a big one. I think, again, going back to the imposter syndrome, I think that was myself always getting in my own way was always a really big one for me. And that, especially in the transition from finishing my PhD into a postdoc and now into a faculty position where, you become more and more independent and you question yourself even more. Am I ready? Is this really can I do this independently without an advisor that's, kind of helping me figure things out as I go? I think that's for me been another really difficult I want to say challenge, not barrier, because I find ways to push through it, but I think it could be a barrier. And so I encourage people to, as we all have been saying, push through that, know that it gets better. But I think was a big one for me, getting in my own way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. We have one more question, and I think that it's good because I think that if we leave on a happy note, I'm happy because I'm happy. This is like my Disney World and everything mixed together. It's just seeing all these faces and just such brilliance and such wonderful thought and knowledge. I appreciate it. You guys are just beautiful, and thank you for everything you do. The last question I have is, how do you stay positive enough to engage in high quality teaching and research in the face of systemic racism?
I think you just focus on the work. The students, I always tell people I'm in academia because I love students. And I focus on my students. I focus on their success because somehow I kind of live vicariously through the successes of my students over the years. Their success becomes my success. I love to see students learn. There's nothing more meaningful and powerful to me than standing in front of a class at the beginning of the semester and asking them questions and seeing the blank stares. And then a month, 2 months later, you stand there and you ask them the same questions and they look at you like, why are you wasting our time? And I have this big smile on my face and they're looking and they're, why is he laughing like that? Because I just witnessed you learn something new, something complex, something great that is going to impact your life and the lives of the people who you're going to touch. And so I think I see it as a relay that I pass on this knowledge to brilliant, energetic, well-meaning individuals, whatever your background, wherever you're coming from, so that you can go out and make a meaningful difference. I don't see my role as just focusing on minority students or students who are underrepresented, because the change that we all require, the change that we all want, is not going to come solely from educating our minority students or talking with them about the issues. It's going to come from educating our majority students, letting them know what the challenges and the difficulties and the systemic and long-term issues have been, and having them in this era change those things. The type of change that we've seen over the past few months in our country, the type of change that people have been calling for. that doesn't happen without engaging. And that's one of the reasons that I don't believe in some of the punitive ways in which the moment somebody says something racist, they're fired or they're let go. Where is the room for discourse? Where's the room for growth? Where's the room to learn and grow in those spaces? I believe in a redemptive conversation about the issues, because I believe that one day this change that Martin Luther King Jr. talked about, this change that John Lewis fought for and lived for, I believe that that change will happen one day. And so I continue to give my all.
Oh, thank you so much. I can barely moderate. It's my job though today. Dr. Downs, what are you thinking? What would you like to add to this conversation? It's just wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Webley.
I think, I'll angle this more towards perhaps the research side. That, as Wilmore said, I think it's important to just focus on the work. I've like many of you, I've also wrestled with imposter syndrome. And, I think there's this added level as a Black scientist, especially if you're, say, at a conference and you're the only Black scientist there, you feel this kind of weight that if you ask a dumb question, it reflects badly, not just on you, but, a whole group of people. And so one way to try to shed all of that, I found, is to just try to silence that and to just focus on the science, focus on the work, and to appreciate that there have been so many people that have sacrificed to allow you to be in this space. And your presence there is a statement. Just your very presence is a statement. And I know that's where some of the weight comes from, but it's also real power. It's also real strength, because you're there and, you represent the hopes and dreams of so many people that came before you. So I think when you feel like you have that force behind you, I don't see how you can't be more positive. And not only that you're standing on the shoulders of giants, but that other people can come up behind you and build from whatever you've done. So I'm maybe perhaps in this moment, over the course of this summer, it's okay to be tired. It's okay to be exhausted. There's a lot of things that are happening that are emotionally taxing. But long-term, moving into the fall, I'm, resting up, because I think we've just got some great things to do. So I'm still extremely positive and energetic to move forwards.
Thank you so much, Dr. Downs. That was so powerful. Dr. Roberts, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the only thing I would add is just ditto to what Dr. Webley said. The students really make it worth it to see them graduate and walk across the stage and be so happy and excited. And then they come to the professors and they say, thank you so much for teaching me, for working with me, for putting up with my stubbornness. Only the elevated students realize when they're being stubborn, but they're so happy and thankful, and to see them grow and learn and start their own careers is really, really fulfilling. So they make it worth it, both in terms of teaching and also in terms of research, to have a brand new student in your lab who doesn't know much, and then to see them graduate with their PhD or their master's and they've learned so much and they're also starting their careers as researchers. It's just really great.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Roberts. It's emotional to have this panel going. And now, last but not least, and you see I left her for last because I can't believe that she's leaving us, but it's nice to have our UMass represented in other places. We're really gonna miss Brittany. Brittany, please.
I was going to say, and I'm going to chime in as someone who has had the pleasurable experience of having students graduate or, you know, go on to do things. I'm just getting to the position where I'll start having students, and I am very much excited about that opportunity. However, I think for me, one of the things that really helped me stay positive through the PhD and through the postdoc is eventually realizing that I don't have to do it by myself. And even better to know that I have others that are like me, look like me, have similar experiences to me that can help me through these struggles that I have. And so kind of, I call them my tribe, because, you know, when I'm doubting myself, when I'm struggling, when I'm having a hard time being productive, when I'm doubting myself on some work because it's been rejected 5 times and I'm not understanding why, that's where my tribe comes in handy. And my tribe is other PhD students, Black and non-Black. It's faculty members that have been advocates, sponsors, and mentors to me. It's individuals that I've met at conferences that have had some interest in my work or me personally, that I've been able to go to. And so I think, you know, starting, especially as an undergrad and going forward, if you're going through grad school and things like that, building that tribe, for me especially, was really important for staying positive and being able to push through the hard times. And even now, as I'm transitioning into my new faculty position and just submitted my first individual by myself PI grant proposal, you know, going back to my tribe, as I'm struggling with that to help me, you know, get through that. So even if you don't have the glowing experience, I'm so excited to have one of working with students and seeing them succeed. I think to get to that point, having a tribe of people like Dr. Roberts, Dr. Downs, Dr. Webley, who have had those experiences and that can support you and speak to that for you when you're struggling and really having a hard time.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you all. Can we all give a virtual applause to express our appreciation for such a powerful dialogue? This was absolutely fantastic, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. We all stand on the shoulders of the next, and I can tell you that I couldn't have been prouder of this panel and the information that was shared. Thank you so much for all participating and volunteering your time. We are now going to be moving to the breakout rooms at this point. They will be for half an hour. And after that, we'll be back for some closing words and thoughts. Have fun. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We have had some discussions that I hope were really insightful and thoughtful. I would hope that everyone has come back now. And I would love for the groups just to report out. If you must leave, feel free to leave at any time. But I would love to hear some of these groups report out.
Before we get too deep into conversations, I actually just put this question in the chat. Sure. But if someone can just send it to the chat, how can undergrads find research opportunities? This is just something that I just don't know. Like, is there a site that lists open lab opportunities or? Thanks.
No worries. I will take your information down and we can get back to you. Oh, yes. Here we go.
Oh, no, I was going to say I didn't in on that really quickly, but we can do offline, and you can also email me directly because I'm happy to talk about that. I did undergrad research for 3 of my 4 years, and I'm happy to talk about how I got into that.
Each one teach one. That's what it's about. And we also have some stuff that was put into the chat that might be helpful to you also. So, Linda, if you could just, I can't see you, Linda, so know that I can't see you. If we could just start with the order for reporting out.
Sure. So, you know, in our group, we talked about, we sort of talked about the importance of building community, and there are lots of questions around how faculty can effectively build community in this sort of online environment. We talked about sort of the importance of building relationships based in care for all of our students. Our group was mostly faculty. So how important it is for students to know, and really how in some ways it's really easy, like as long as that students just want to know that somebody cares, and how powerful and impactful that is to the individual student's experience.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The next, can we have someone else report out from their group?
I can. We talked about how each student comes with into the programs that they're in with different backgrounds and capabilities and burdens and gifts. And we also talked about the importance of having a advocate and about the pipeline to from undergrad to graduate school and how it's not built for minority students, in addition to just mentorship and other things. I'm sure I'm missing a little bit, but those are the parts I remember.
Thank you so much. Can we have another group report out?
I can go chime in here. We also talked about the advocates, but also the distinction between advocates and mentors, and how does one go around cultivating an advocate. And a large portion of the time was also spent on discussing how and why faculty should be trained to deal with interactions in their labs, and what does it mean to do such training, and should it be a one-off thing. And I think the consensus was that it should be mandatory for faculty, and also that it should not be a one-off training session.
Thank you so much. Can we have another group report out?
I could speak for our group, but please chime in, folks, if I missed something. There's some really great questions about how undergraduate students can both disrupt sort of racist discourses, dynamics, especially white students, and a lot of great ideas, and especially through like peer mentoring and like adopting an underclass person, and changing culture of competition and isolation, and through those relationships building sort of like a different culture within science and STEM.
Thank you so much. Would another group like to report out?
Yeah, so we talked about the path from undergrad to master's, or all the way to grad school. And we also had a discussion about how policy change can be done to help students of color, more students of color, find their way into opportunities in graduate school, because we're just not as well represented as we should be right now.
Thank you so much.
And
another group?
In my session, we focused on imposter syndrome and really what our backgrounds in that have been, our experiences, and how we can move ourselves forward. Trying to find again that sense of having an advocate to help you out, to push you forwards and speak on your behalf. I think that was really important, and that was probably one of the biggest messages that came through the entire process. That support mechanism and moving forwards within your research work, and finding the connections and finding the networks that will help you bring people together.
Thank you so much. Another group?
So our group talked about quite a few things. We talked about microaggressions and how to deal with those. We talked about what it feels like and how to deal with the feeling of, I think we mentioned in the panel, misrepresenting the Black community because of the questions that you may have, or the ideas that you may bring up or want to bring up in a group setting, and how to deal with that, and how to make sure your voice is being heard, and that you can and how to block that aspect. And we also talked a little bit about how we can kind of, again, syndrome and put ourselves out there as our non-Black colleagues would, to put ourselves in Front Street.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. May I have someone else report out?
Our group talked a lot about sort of this idea of like interrupting instances of racism, which certainly I think highlights more of the interpersonal dynamics rather than the systemic pieces, but which are parts of our everyday interactions. So, talking about like the space, particularly for white people who either are allies, or we talked about this notion of co-conspirators, and Stephen Johnson in our group had suggested that, and I'm going to post that into sorry, Stephen Fernandez. I don't know why I called you Johnson. But this notion of sort of interrupting and talking about serving as an ally or a co-conspirator, whether it's for other faculty or students, and also particularly how when there are so few either Black faculty or Black students, that idea of sort of outing people and the challenge in sort of addressing that issue while being supportive and supporting the faculty or the colleague and the student.
Thank you so much for your report. Would another group like to report out? Would another group like to report out? I know there were more groups, but I think that we can see a pattern regardless. I think that we can see that there is a pattern that if we took all of the things that were talked about and rolled them into just this big program, it would be the most amazing diversity and inclusion program you have ever seen in your life. I think that we have to think about this, that many times we get scared when it's time to talk about race. We get very nervous and do I have enough knowledge? And I don't know what to do, but just now we've just proven that we all have what it is and we have what it takes to have a good dialogue about race and all these other difficult conversations like class, gender. I think that we all have it within us and it's up to us to recognize our ability to do such. I think that if we actually took every single word that was spoken by all of the people that reported out, it would make an amazing plan. And I want you to take that away with you. And remember that it's okay, we all make mistakes. And it's about seeing how we can fix our mistakes. We apologize and we move on, right? And we move on in love, right? All about the love. So I want to tell you, send you with my heart. I got to circle myself with my UMass love. And I want to tell you, thank you for taking the time out to care. Thank you for taking the time out to join us. Thank you for taking the time out to be the fantastic panel that we had speaking. I just can't. Thank you for leading the discussions in the rooms. Thank you for being a part of our UMass family, regardless of where you come from. I hope that we will see you in future events like this. Our hope is to have these events. And when we do have these events scheduled, we definitely will be in contact. And we hope to send some information out with some resources and some other things that are happening at UMass so that we can all be one big family. Thank you so much, and you have a fantastic evening.